Okay, I think I'm recording. My name's Louise Larson. I run August Consulting, um, a consulting practice to help families on the road to college. And this is my December webinar that I usually present live, but December is a busy month, and I just thought recording was better, and I did that last year. And it worked out pretty well. So here we go. So usually the way I start these is with kind of news and notes and information, recent information in college admissions and what's going on. So the first thing I wanted to share, I was on a webinar around financial aid, and they had a man, his name is Dr. Phil Levine. He has a book out that I'm actually going to read. He is a PhD in economics from Wellesley. And if you are kind of trying to figure out the financial aid, merit scholarships, how to pay for college, this is a PhD from Wellesley. And he said when his child was approaching the college years, he was so confused. And he said, the whole financial aid and the college cost piece was very confusing for me. And I have a PhD in economics, and I'm very good with numbers. So if you find this a little bit overwhelming, at least there's some comfort there. He has a book out. I don't have the name written down right now, but he's Phil Levine, and he's a Wellesley professor. So if you want to find that book, it shouldn't be hard to find. The early Common App numbers for the class of 2024 are very high at the Common App. 41% jump from the 2020 cycle. And the individual student use of the Common App has increased 12%. This is a pretty big jump in early action and early decisions. So we'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out. Maybe more kids are more organized to apply early. I don't know. Maybe the regular decision will also show a jump, or maybe it won't. No way of knowing. University of Arizona, if you've ever made a mistake with your bank account, don't feel bad, because the University of Arizona miscalculated the cash on hand and lost track of $240 million. And they only have cash on hand for 97 days. This is like in the past 5-6 weeks. So, we all make mistakes. University of North Carolina, Wilmington was sanctioned for surpassing their out-of-state enrollment levels. So what does that mean? They actually, for the second year in a row, they did this. North Carolina has an 18% cap on out-of-state enrollment. So the North Carolina public schools can't enroll more than 18%. They were at 27% with 200 extra students, and they suffered a $4 million penalty. Now, if you say, why are you sharing this with me? Well, because when I hear that schools are oversubscribed like that, it tells me that UNC Wilmington might be a little harder to get into next year for out-of-state students, or the North Carolina schools in general might be really careful about their out-of-state enrollment numbers. I was on a webinar around writing supplements, and I heard a great quote from a college admissions professional around how to structure supplements. And if you have a senior or know a senior, they might still be writing at this point. And the quote was, show us that you know us. So I've heard it said, like, you don't want to write a love letter, like, I think you're beautiful, why you might love someone, but you want it to be more like, why are we a good fit? And so that is a little food for thought if you know someone writing supplements. International students have had a big surge in applications this cycle. Now, international students during COVID really dropped. And so that's part of the puzzle. But just remember that international students typically tend to bring some sort of diversity of some kind, either linguistic or racial or I don't know what, but they do bring diversity. They are very desirable because most colleges don't offer them financial aid. There are a handful of selective colleges that will offer financial aid to international students, but most colleges, it's federal aid and they just don't do it. So those students bring diversity and they bring money. Interesting stats on youth sports. Swimming is down 26%. Baseball is down 20%, tennis is up 51%, and golf is up 32%. World language study dropped 16% from the 2016 to 2021, and German actually dropped 33%. So languages are waning. And we see that with West Virginia University, which I've discussed in my past couple webinars, as they have made changes, pretty drastic changes to their humanities that they're offering. And there's been a lot of debate about West Virginia, like what if you're an impoverished student, and I'm going to talk more about that tier of student, and you want to study the humanities and you're from West Virginia is going to be your best, probably one of your most affordable options. And so the challenge becomes, if your state flagship doesn't offer what you want to study, there's an access issue. Okay, I'm going to try and make this very simple. Colorado caps their public schools too. They allow I'm going to have to go back to this one because it's really sort of complicated to explain. The FAFSA, I've been talking about the FAFSA, and the FAFSA as of right now will be available December 31st. So get ready for New Year's Eve. The FAFSA will become available. It's going from 100 questions to 20 in order to simplify this. A lot of people are like, this is an outrage. How are we going to do this? But what they forget is only a couple of years ago, the FAFSA used to open January 1st. So this isn't, I mean, it's a big deal in a lot of ways, but it isn't the end of the world. And if your student, if you anticipate you might generate need-based aid, the CSS profile is available. If you're applying to schools that require the profile, you can submit that now, and they'll probably give you a financial aid package based on that. St. Rose College in Albany has announced that they are closing, and they are not going to, they're closing in May. And I mentioned that, St. Rose is a smaller school. It's in the Northeast. If you find a real hidden gem for your child, if you find that they're like a little school and it seems so great, and I'm not saying it isn't, but these littler schools, when you hear about closures, you don't hear like, Villanova's closing. You hear these little schools that do good work, and for some reason they're just not viable. So if you find your child looking at one of these schools, it is worth it to do a little due diligence, because when colleges close, all sorts of other local schools pop up and say, we'll help you transfer to our school, and we're going to try to make this right. And there is a lot of effort on behalf of the students from these schools, but the reality is your major may not be offered. The financial aid package you might not be reciprocated. You might have some requirements, or your credits don't transfer. So it's called forced transfer when a school closed, and forced transfer is not the best place to be. So just putting that out there. In the testing world, the Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, where I actually got my master's degree, is actually going test blind. So, we have test optional, we have test required, and test blind means they won't even consider any test scores. Nowhere on the application are there any test scores. So the UCs are currently test blind. So it's interesting to me that another West Coast school is going to be test blind. Test optional has dramatically helped increase international applications, because it used to be when test scores were absolutely required. If you live in a pretty rural area, or a third world country, or not a particularly developed region, maybe you have maybe it's a challenge to take the ACT or the SAT. Test optional has really opened up the door for international students. The other thing that has come up is more colleges, even kind of smaller, middle of the road in terms of selectivity regional schools, are doing more and more to recruit in other parts of the country. And one of the ways that they're doing that is they are hiring recruiting representatives that don't live like where the school is. They actually live in the region where the school wants to recruit. So more and more students, more and more schools are recruiting in a wider range to try and bring in their class. I talked about the FAFSA, that the FAFSA is changing, and I want to just, as we head into the holidays, I want to kind of focus this on something to be aware of, and maybe to help. If you're on this, you're probably trying to figure out, how does college admissions work? How is this going to go? What do I need to do? So there's a couple different things that I want to share with you in conjunction with all that. In terms of Christmas, this book is a very good book, The Price You Pay for College by Ron Lieber, and he is a New York Times columnist, and he writes personal finance columns, and he did a lot of work around this. And I heard him on a webinar, and he actually at this point has a child. One of his children is, I think his oldest is maybe like a junior or a senior. So she's in this world now. And there's two things. If you're looking for a Christmas gift, this book is wonderful. But he also, in this, if you Google this, he has for $300, he has an online course for families to learn more about how to position yourself to afford college. Are you going to be a financial aid family? Are you going to be a merit scholarship family? Are you full pay? And if so, how do you address that? But I heard him on a webinar recently. So certainly his webinar, his class can be good. His book is great. But I heard him on a webinar, and he's very down to earth. And he said two things. He said, when parents read his book, when like his peers read this book, they were so angry to learn that like paying for college is like getting on an airplane. Like you don't know what the person next to you paid. You don't know, if you could have gotten a cheaper ticket. And then he also, as he talked about his own child approaching this, and I just thought this was so funny because people will call me like, US News said this. And I'm like, oh, who listens to US News? Like that is a magazine selling, thing. That's not really any useful information. And he said, I would like to know when I'm taking my child to these colleges, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, what I would like to know is like in 30 or 40 years, if somebody in this class dies, how many people show up at the funeral from this college? He said, I would like to know when an alumni from this college dies, how many of their peers show up at their funeral when they're older? And he said, we could call it the funeral attendance ratio. And I thought that was so funny because probably that's something that every parent would want, that their child leaves college with a community and peers and a network and people that care about them in good times and bad. And where's that statistic? I don't know. So I loved it though, the funeral attendance ratio. And so in that vein, I want to go back to the FAFSA because there was another piece about the FAFSA that came out, and I'm not going to go into too much of the nuts and bolts of the formula, but in the changes that they're trying to make, they've made some mistakes, and it is going to cost people money. And when I looked at to give you an example, they allow you to shield a certain amount of savings. So if you have, maybe they allow you to shield $30,000, and that's not the number, it's just an example. So you can have $30,000 that isn't counted towards being able to pay for college. And there's a couple pieces of the equation that are like that. And they've made a mistake that it will actually cost people. Now, is it going to cost people if you're on this webinar and you have, a job and you're college educated? It's not going to cost you an amount of money that would be a deal breaker, but it will cost an amount of money that could be a deal breaker for students who are trying to do this on their own. And so what I want to do is talk about a couple different things Whoops, just one of my books just fell. So in that vein, you're here and you're listening to me, and I read this book, and this book is called Class, and this woman, Stephanie Land, wrote a book called Made, and after I read Class, I read Made. But she talks about, she goes to the University of Montana as a single parent, as a full-time student with no one. Like, she didn't have anyone, like a sister or a grandparent. She was so on her own doing it. And it was gut-wrenching to read about the choices she was making. So when the FAFSA formula costs someone like this, say $300, like, she talked about getting an extra grant of, and it changed, she said, and now we can go buy a bunch of meat and berries. Like, she was, really struggling. And so if you read a book like this, and I enjoyed it. One of my brothers actually went to the University of Montana. I've been there a couple of times. It's a neat place. You get a different perspective on, like, okay, my kid is going to be okay because I'm probably going to send them with a computer, and they have a cell phone, and I can, help them if they have a problem, or at least take a phone call. So this is a good book to read. Just give yourself some good context of, okay, it's stressful. I know it's stressful. I always say my last kid is a sophomore, and I'm so in college, and I'm so happy I'm not doing it. And in that same vein, now, Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance came out in 2016. That's when I read it. So I'm not getting on here making a political statement, whatever, at all. But if you read Hillbilly Elegy, you hear again about him, like, bone on bone, going to college, and he took, I don't know what he did. He was taking like 24 credits a semester and not sleeping to do it faster for less money. So when you read about people who are really, truly on their own, and the segue to this was that the FAFSA is probably going to cost really needy people a little bit of money here and there, that could maybe be the difference between them maybe making it and not. And then the other book, Educated by Tara Westover, again, she has a abscess tooth and can't get it fixed. And then they finally got her her student loan money, and they wanted to give her the $5,500. She's like, I only need $1,000 for the dentist. Like, the poor thing didn't even know she was entitled to have this money to get herself through school. And the other book, if you want to really kind of just have some context, is The Privileged Poor by his name's Tony Jack, and here it's Anthony Abraham Jack, but he goes by Tony Jack. And he talks about what it's like to go through an elite institution as an impoverished student, because yes, they do give you, I think he goes to Amherst or Williams. Anyway, Amherst, yeah, he went to Amherst, and he talked about what it's like to be an impoverished student at an elite university. So as you go into the holiday season, whatever you're doing, surely your children have some time off. This is a way to just give you a little balance and context on, yes, it's stressful. And I will share, this is the last little thing I want to share. All of my webinars since maybe the summer, I've talked about the stress of shepherding one of my biological children through law school applications. And it is so overwhelming to not know. It is so overwhelming. Like, where is the information? How am I going to figure this out? Who has it? And I can't tell you how stressful it was to not know. And it was so valuable to me doing what I do, to know, to be on the other side of, like, how's this going to work when parents call me out of say, hey, somebody gave me your name, I have a couple questions. And I'm like, yes, I understand. I know, I don't know everything, but I know in this world of college admissions, if I don't know, I know quickly how to get to the answer. And so I'm not going to say we, because I kept saying he applied to some schools, and I did not know that law school admission is rolling. So when he sent the applications out, I thought, okay, by Thanksgiving, you should hear some answers. And by Thanksgiving, he had not heard anything. So the weekend after Thanksgiving, I said, let's just look at your portals and see if everything's in order. And we did. and they were all in order, and there was nothing. It was crickets. So I looked, and now he was at like the 2-month mark of sending out applications. And I did a little Googling, and it seemed like schools would send you a yes or a no very quickly. But if they wanted to see where the rest of their pool, what kind of applications they were getting, and they wanted to see if you fit in, maybe they would wait. So I said, well, maybe he'll get in, maybe he won't. He had very average grades, very average as LSATs, just a little bit of an interesting personal story, but I didn't know. And 2 days ago, he got an acceptance. And then yesterday he got another one. So, he got in. And here's the interesting thing. Part of him might want to work. And if you said to me, can my kid defer their college application? I know exactly what to tell you. I'm like, you can do this, you can do that. I know the steps. How do you request a deferral? Here's what you do. And it should work 90% of the time if you call me. And I'm kind of like, if you wanted to work for a year, how do I figure out if you could take a deferral at law school? So still, as happy as it is, and as challenging as it was to get through, and as valuable an exercise it was for me to be on the other side and not know what we're doing and have to figure it out. Again, now we have a couple of yeses, which is so nice. I don't know. Can you take a deferral from law school? So stay tuned. Anyway, I'm going to post this. I wish you and your families a wonderful break from school in December. And I will, the articles that, any articles I referenced are on my, Two Rivers College Consulting Facebook page and my August Consulting Facebook page. And I'm also on, YouTube under August Consulting and Instagram. So